Hi, welcome out to Lesson 2 in the music theory course that I've been putting together. Today we're quite simply going to be talking about different kinds of chords, different kinds of triads. That's a kind of chord which I'll explain in a little bit. And that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so now time to talk about different kinds of chords. There are many different kinds of chords, but one type that I want you to be familiar with in the beginning is known as the triad. So, a triad is made up of three notes, kind of like a triceratops has three horns. Anything with triangle, has three of something. So, let's play a C triad, shall we? Pretty easy. So we're going to find C, and then we're going to skip a white note and play E. And then we're going to skip another note, and we're going to play G. So you're playing every other white note, at least in this case with C, and I'll explain here in a minute. So this is actually what's known as the C major triad. And with triads, there's actually many different kinds. There's a major triad, a minor triad, a diminished triad, and an augmented triad. So for now, we're going to talk about major and minor. So here we have major. Now I want you to, actually let me explain this. So every triad has what's called a root, which is the bass note there, or the most bottom note in this case. Then we have the third, and we have the fifth. So root, third, fifth. You can also call the root the first because it's the first note here at the bottom. The root can be on top or in the middle, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But remember, just root, third, fifth, and that's a C triad. Now, in a major triad, let's count the distance between the first and the third. In a major triad, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 half steps between the root, or first, and the third. In a minor triad, there are only 3 half steps between the first and the third. So 1, 2, 3. Also, actually, so let me explain it this way. So we have a C major triad. The only difference between a major triad and a minor triad is that middle note there. That middle note, the third, will tell you whether it's major or minor. So if you have a major chord and you want to get to minor quickly without counting the half steps in between, you just lower that third by a half step down that way. And that will decrease the amount of half steps between the first and the third from 4 to 3. So there we have it. C major triad, C minor triad. And now if you want to get to diminished, first you want to get into minor. So here we're already in minor. And you just want to lower your fifth by another half step. There we go. So that is diminished. Another thing I want to point out is that major chords are nice and happy. Minor chords have a sad feel to them. And diminished chords have a very tense sound to them. So happy, sad, and tense. Now we'll talk about inversions. So we have a C major triad, and to invert it, to put it what's called first inversion, we take the root note and we move it to the top. So we take the root note, or the bottom note, we're taking the bottom note and we're moving it to the top. So we're taking C from the bottom and putting it on top. So now we have a first inversion C major chord, or C major triad. So like I explained before, the root of the chord isn't always at the bottom when you're in an inversion. If you're in an inversion, the root of the chord can be on top, or it can be in the middle as well, and I'll explain that in a second. So let's put this first inversion triad into a second inversion triad. Well, we're going to take our E here, our bottom note, and we're going to move it to the top. Right there. So now we have a C major chord in second inversion. Now let's put it in third inversion, shall we? Well, let's take this G, move it up here. Well, there is no third inversion with a triad chord, because when you put it in third inversion, you're back to root position with C at the bottom, E in the middle, and G up top. Now let's play let's play a D major chord, shall we? D major triad. So let's figure this out, and you can follow along with me if you'd like. So you're gonna root of the chord will be D, and then remember to make it a major chord. The distance between the first and the third has to be 4 half steps. So you take your root note and you hold it down, and then you count 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 half steps. There you go. And then the fifth in a major chord is 1, 2, 3 half steps away from the third. Like that. Now let's make this D major chord a D minor chord. So think about what we need to do that. So we're going to take our third and we're going to lower it a half step. We got a D minor chord. What about a D diminished chord? What are we going to do with that? Think about it for a minute. So we're going to take the fifth this time, and we are going to lower it a half step. Very tense sound. So say you have a major chord. Let's go back to the major part of it, and you want to go to diminished. Well, if you're not in minor already, you have to lower the third and the fifth, like so. But if you're in minor already, you only need to lower the fifth because the third is already lowered for you, like so. And you can, I really highly suggest you get on your own keyboard and you play around playing major chords on different kinds of notes, knowing that the distance between the first and third for a major chord should be 4 half steps. For a minor chord, it should be only 3. And then with the diminished, you want you take a major chord and lower the third and the fifth. Now I should probably mention on how to figure out the fifth. The fifth is always going to be, so let's take our C major chord. The fifth is going to be, let's count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's going to be 7 half steps between the first and the fifth. So remember, major chord, 4 half steps between the first and the third, and 7 half steps between the first and the fifth. Same thing goes with minor. There are 7 half steps between the first and the fifth, but remember there's only 3 half steps between the first and the third. With a diminished chord, how many half steps are going to be between the first and the fifth? Well, let's take a look here. Here's our major chord, here's our minor chord, and here's our diminished chord. Remembering that we lower the fifth by a half step to get into diminished, from minor to diminished, we can deduct that there are only going to be 6 half steps between the first and the fifth. So let's count them. Let's leave the third out for a second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there you have it. So that's a general way of how to figure out different major and minor chords. Let's do one last one to wrap it up to make sure we got all the concepts correctly. So let's play an F major chord. So I'm just going to give you a second to kind of try to figure that out on your own. Feel free to pause the video if you need more time. So I'll get started here. We have our first. So anytime we're trying to find a specific chord, like let's say we have F chord, the first note you want to play is F, will be the bottom of the chord, at least if you're in root position. And then let's say we have an F major, so we want our third. So where's our third going to be? How many half steps away was that again? Hopefully you said 4. 4, there you go. And how many half steps between the first and the fifth? Remember that it's 7. So right there. So there you have it, an F major chord. Now how do we make that an F minor chord if we have the major chord already? Well, we lower the third, and then we have an F minor chord, and then an F diminished chord, you're going to lower your fifth as well. So there you go. So like I said, I highly recommend you go on your own keyboard and you play around with different kinds of chords starting on different notes. Try starting on different white key notes and try starting on different black key notes. That'll give you a lot of experience on how to play these different kinds of chords. Remember, if you're trying to play a major chord and it sounds sad, then you don't have it quite right, because if it sounds sad, then it's a minor chord. So feel free to rewind any part of this video or leave me any comments or questions about how to make triads, and we'll go from there. So anyway, there you have it, triads at the keyboard. So remember, we talked about different kinds of chords, major chord, minor chord, diminished chord. Before going to this lesson, I highly suggest you re-watch that part and make sure you have that 100%, because we're going to move kind of fast here. So say we have a major chord, like so. So a song generally won't have a single chord the whole song. If it did, it would sound kind of boring. So what we have instead is what's called a chord progression. So all you really need to know about a chord progression is that it's a set of chords that makes up a song. This is a very common chord progression. We have a C major chord, an F major chord, and a G major chord, and then we go back to C. That's a very common chord progression in music. So again, a chord progression is just a progression of chords, very simple. So why is C, F, G, back to C? How can we explain that, and how can we move that to different keys? Because if we play C, F, G, that only works for the key of C, that chord progression. So let me put it this way. So first we're going to play what's called a first chord. It's based off the first note of the C major scale. I suggest you look at the C major scale video as well before watching this one. So we're going to take the first note of the C major scale and build a major chord on it. And then we're going to take the fourth note of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to build a major chord on it. And then we're going to take the fifth note of the scale, the major scale, and we're going to build a major chord on it. And then we're going to go back to the first. So the most common chord progression in music is a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, back to the 1 chord. So 1, 4, 5, 1. And you can build a chord on any note of a major or minor scale. So let's take that chord progression to the next note over. So let's say we have a D. We're going to have the 1, 4, 5 chord progression in D. Well, first we need to build a major triad on D. So we have the first, or the root. Our third, remember, for major is going to be 4 half steps away from the root. So the third is 4 half steps away. And then we have the fifth, which is 7 half steps away from the root. So here we go. This is the first chord. And then our D scale. We'll go over the D scale more in depth later. So if you get a little lost here, don't worry. Just remember the most important thing is that the chord progression is 1. And then we're going to go to the chord that's on the fourth note of the scale. So D scale goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our fourth chord. And our fifth chord here, and back to 1. So 1, 4, 5, 1. And by the way, at least at this point, these are all going to be major chords. We will play around with minor chords and minor scales later on. But basically what I wanted you to get out of this video is that the most common chord progression is 1, 4, 5, 1. And then a chord progression is simply a progression of chords that kind of gives direction to a song. Okay, so that concludes Lesson 2 in the music theory course. Today we talked about different kinds of chords. We talked about triads, and that there are quite a few different kinds of triads. There's a major triad, a minor triad, and a diminished triad. Remember that in a major triad, the distance in half steps between the first and the third is 4 half steps, and the distance between the first and the fifth is 7 half steps. With a minor chord, distance between the first and the third is only 3 half steps, but the distance between the first and the fifth is still 7. With a diminished chord, the distance between the first and the third is 3. The distance between the first and the fifth is only 6 because we're lowering both the third and the fifth. So only 6 half steps between the first and the fifth. We also briefly talked about inversions. We'll probably talk more about this later, and I'll probably throw this material into another lesson to kind of make it concrete. But I suggest you look over this video quite a few times. Make sure you got the idea, like any of the other videos I do. But anyway, if you have any comments or questions, let me know, and I'll talk through with. Hopefully I can help you out. Like I said, I can't get to everybody. I'll try my best. If I can point you in the right direction, I'll do that. If I can write something out real quick, I can do that as well. I'm kind of a busy guy right now. And trying to put out more and more of these videos all the time. I know that might not work out every week, so bear with me. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the second lesson, and I'll see you guys and girls next time.